Tokenization is everywhere. Today we're going to be breaking down what the market looks like. I think you guys will love it. We're going to have Ondo here on in a moment, so stay tuned for that. And just a word from our sponsors. I want to thank our sponsor today, and of course that is Uphold. If you are holding crypto right now and not earning rewards, you're essentially leaving money on the table. And the reality is, in today's market, you need to be able to move instantly. That's why Uphold's flexible staking is such a game changer. You can earn weekly rewards automatically on assets you already hold without a lockup. That's most important. You can sell anytime. It's the perfect setup for anyone who wants to grow their holdings without losing their exit strategy. Download the Uphold app today and try it for yourself. So let's jump into it today. I want to lead off with a clip before we bring our guest on. And if you guys haven't been watching what's been going on in tokenized equities, this is the show for you, because it's going to get into where the market could go, a lot of the new players, how we'll see equities fare in this area. And one of the big players, of course, has been the DTCC. I want to start with this clip. Take a look. Their CEO sounds like he's doing a little bit of the Italian Goodfellas. Take a look.
When the early conversations on blockchain focused on disintermediation, this thinking was premature at best, and I'm being very polite about how I say it. The digital highway begins with us. That's a fact. DTCC will be your strategic partner.
You see the limits of what the current model offers. The DTCC will operate, he said, 24/5.
All right, so the limits, as you guys know, 24/5. One of the players that have been out there in the market for some time has been Ondo, so we wanted to bring on Ian coming in from Ondo Finance. How are you, Ian?
Doing great. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So we're going to get into a lot around where this landscape is today. If you look at just the current stock table, or at least the tokenized stocks table right here, you can kind of see Ondo in a very strong position here as one of the leaders in regards to overall performance. At the same time, when you look at the actual holders, when you look at asset holders moving into the platform right now, X stocks, one of my favorite platforms, is leading the way right now. When you look at these platforms like this in terms of growth opportunity, and especially where Ondo is today, what are the top platforms that you think are going to be around in the next 12 months?
Yeah, great question. I mean, as you rightfully point out, Ondo is the leader right now in tokenized stocks and ETFs. We've got 60%, 65% market share, depending on, the day that you look. Xstocks was first to launch. You also had the Robinhood platform that launched before us. But Ondo really has taken the lead, in part because we were able to do what others couldn't, which is offer permissionless wrappers in combination with very strong execution quality and liquidity. So anyone who buys any of our stocks on the blockchain rails can rest assured they're buying it at more or less brokerage prices, right? Our assets track those brokerage prices best in class, and that really is what investors are looking for. What you're really starting to see is that crypto exchanges, crypto wallets, everyone is trying to turn themselves into the everything app, and that includes offering stocks. They come to us to essentially power that offering, and we are best in class at offering liquidity and execution. You have seen other platforms also get into this space. I mean, Binance launched their own B stocks offering. BitGet is offering stocks on their platform. So I do fully expect other players to still enter, but Ondo definitely has a first mover advantage.
So first mover advantage that we have seen, obviously, with X stocks, many of the ones you just mentioned, even Coinbase now getting into the game. So a lot of activity. The one thing, though, that I think everybody, at least that I've talked to within our own communities and a lot online, has been the market hours, trading availability. If you look at the current situation right now, you're talking about a 24/5 potential opportunity here versus like a 24/7, which is where you have a chance, if you're around the globe, to be able to play these markets, especially over the weekends. Why are you still going with 24/5 as the primary focus? Why not go ahead and extend this out to full tradability?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it kind of gets to the core of what these tokenized stocks really are, right? There are new instruments that are being issued on chain. What you buy is in token form economic exposure to the underlying. Just like when you buy a stable coin, you basically buy a $1 on chain that is backed by $1 in a bank account or Treasury in a custody account. But for us to mint a new token, we actually have to be able to acquire the underlying to back these tokens. As a result, we are minting and burning of creating new tokens on the underlying markets that right now only offer 24/5. Now, there are ways that we are working on in order to extend this to 24/7 minting and burning. And in parallel, a lot of our partners have already deployed these assets on their own books on crypto exchanges where you can actually trade these things 24/7. So if you go
Yeah.
on Binance or BitGet or other platforms right now, you can buy Ondo stocks 24/7, but not directly minted by us over the weekend, but from pre-funded accounts with market makers.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a good explanation of it. For those who don't really completely understand how a perp works, because if you if you don't have a stock that's launched, if you look at what's going on with SpaceX, we'll most likely see the same thing going on with Anthropic, et cetera. Explain to me what happens when a perp essentially gets matured into an actual IPO. How does that process take place if I'm holding that perp when the IPO occurs and there's available stock out on the market?
Yeah, it's a great question because not only do you see a proliferation right now in these spot tokens that Ondo offers, but there's also a proliferation of these perpetual futures platforms that also offer exposure to stocks, even pre-IPO stocks. When a perp launches on a pre-IPO stock, you can only do that really with a perp because there's no real way to actually acquire the underlying physical, so the spot tokenization doesn't work yet. On a perp platform, everything is purely synthetic exposure, so it is absolutely possible to create a perpetual future. At the time of IPO, that pre-IPO stock will just converge to the actual price that it is trading on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange and the like. Now, there's real risk in these markets, obviously, because before a market launches, what really is the price of this thing? But a lot of people want to speculate, want to get exposure to these pre-IPO stocks, and that is why they go in on these perps platforms. What you just showed, though, is very interesting because it does highlight a key problem right now with perpetual futures, and that is that they are incredibly capital inefficient. In a normal and right now, if people want to go and have a perp, what they do is they use stable coins as collateral that they can then do and open a futures contract, perpetual futures contract on these positions, right? But you have to deposit stable coins in order to actually open that. A market maker then has to come in and short the perp, but also with stablecoin collateral. They then have to hedge off chain. So this goes into a wider issue where there isn't real connection right now between perpetual futures platforms and TradFi platforms because they lack the tokenized spot collateral. And that is what Ondo will launch pretty soon in order to actually have tokenized spot collateral on these perps platforms and dramatically increase capital efficiency.
So when you say launching that pretty soon, what does that look like in terms of the roadmap, timing-wise? Because there's a lot happening, obviously, in the IPO space right now.
Yes, that's right. So for our perpetual futures platform, we actually launched public beta earlier this week. We capped it at a limited waitlisted user set because, quite frankly, the demand that we see is pretty overwhelming. We expect to release that over the next couple of weeks so that we can do general availability. But the demand that we've seen so far just points to the fact that everyone right now wants to express their opinion and interest on stocks, ideally via perps to get leverage. There's just a lot of hype right now around the space, right? And this really is going to also catalyze with the SpaceX IPO, the OpenAI IPO happening later this year, Anthropic IPO. So we are anticipating the flows into these tokenized stocks platforms and perps platforms only to increase because it really is the only option for a lot of offshore investors, quite frankly.
Right.
Ondo does have the capabilities to also tokenize spot assets on the day of their IPO. So this Friday coming up, we will tokenize SpaceX day one and make it available to all the investors offshore that want to buy it.
All right, so day one on SpaceX token. Right now, you can go out, of course, on XStocks. We've got BitGet Wallet, of course, they're doing it, a successful SpaceX campaign that they're launching. And the key here, I guess, is going to be timing and exposure because this is going to happen with other, launch IPOs. You mentioned Anthropic, OpenAI, et cetera. But there could be others that would most likely make it maybe this year. And I think that's the biggest thing that people are looking at in terms of being able to get into these kinds of investments. When you look at what's going on with SpaceX, I mean, many people would say this is going to be a market wrecker. What do you think? Do you think that this is going to be a problem in terms of, this is my opinion. I think we're going to see a lot of exit liquidity being retail, unfortunately, and going into an IPO of this size. And here we are 16 hours away from this thing.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see the dynamics on this one because I think it is the largest IPO ever. The valuation is truly mind-blowing. And offshore, though, there's a lot of demand for these types of stocks still.
Okay.
Right? So whether or not it goes up or down, I mean, we're seeing tremendous inbounds offshore because it really is the only way to get exposure to SpaceX often is via this tokenized wrapper format. So we expect very meaningful flows. Whether or not it goes up or down, I'm not sure, but I think a lot of brokers in particular are also preparing for record trading volumes. I think a lot of people are not prepared for the flows that are coming, to be honest.
I'm looking at some of the at least early data right now. This has drawn more than 70 billion worth of retail orders alone. It's raised 75 billion. This is making retail interest alone enough to nearly fill the entire sale. And if you kind of compare this to Aramco, Saudi Aramco, which happened back in 2020, I mean, that was barely $30 billion. And here we are, at 2x of that plus. So you've got SpaceX as a result now, 20% of their IPO is going to be allocated to retail investors. That's the concern I have that I think is the one that could really affect the market. Do you think we'll see a circuit breaker thrown in the market, like stop trading, exchanges lock up? What do you think?
I think it's definitely possible because it's untested. Financial market infrastructure is very good until it isn't. I think you'll also see quite a lot of clearing and executing brokers potentially hit their nat cap limits just because of the flows, right? So I think it's possible that we see something break on Friday, particularly given the retail demand.
Yeah. Well, I think the point we're going to be dealing with is, does SpaceX, kind of go down in history as the one IPO that took traditional finance down? Is my question.
I mean, it further also just illustrates how, TradFi is great, but the rails are pretty antiquated, right? I do hope over time we actually get to some native IPOs on public blockchain rails. Not to say that public blockchains are without fault, but I think over time it's going to be good to have alternative rails that can stay up 24/7 seamlessly.
You think Elon is going to sell Bitcoin to kind of get some excess cash here going into this IPO? I wonder how he's going to do cash management. They're sitting on a decent amount, I would assume, right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure he's going to sell Bitcoin, but I do know that plenty of other people have sold Bitcoin already in anticipation of this IPO and some others. I mean, you've seen a pretty drag on the crypto markets and broader technology markets, in part to create some liquidity for this event. I think, quite frankly, we'll see something similar happen with Anthropic and OpenAI as well. But yeah, it was untested times. It's going to be very interesting to see how it evolves. But I do know that Ondo, as a tokenized stock provider to offshore investors, stands to gain quite a bit with this.
I don't think there's enough Bitcoin out there that would really be in a position where it would really shift markets. I think this is probably going to come from the traditional, securities markets. What we're going to see of other stocks being sold to possibly go into dry powder. Some of that, I think, has been the dips that we've seen. Yeah, we've seen a little bit of that already. So there's definitely some capital on the sideline going into this. Tokenized shares of private companies. This is something that we think is a great opportunity, but it also could shift the landscape for maybe future IPOs. We're already seeing a lot of privately held companies in the robotics space, even in the early stage AI space right now. What about that as an opportunity, especially for tokenized pre-stocks on Ondo?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. Ondo historically has always focused on assets that are already in the public markets, right? We believe it is very important for investors to have full pricing transparency on what it is worth and then what they should be paying, and to have deep liquidity into these markets so that they can buy in size. Now, clearly, there's a lot of demand for these pre-IPO stocks too, particularly the ones that we've already been mentioning on the show: OpenAI, Anthropic, SpaceX, a few others. I think if a company is, call it, within 12 months of IPO and there's a real path to liquidity for investors, it can absolutely make sense to tokenize these and make them available, particularly to offshore investors that otherwise would not have access. Doing it for purely private companies where the path to IPO is unclear and people may still be illiquid for a couple of years, that's not something that Ondo will be focusing on. But luckily, the IPO pipeline is shaping up to be quite robust. So there's probably a couple of pre-IPO companies that we can do.
Interesting. Okay. I look at it this way. Okay, so you've got Coinbase moving into the market. Obviously, Robinhood already been there. We've got DTCC has already spun up. And then, of course, we see X stocks and the growth that we've seen right there. We showed the chart earlier. Why would people choose a 24/5 versus a 24/7 marketplace? Why wouldn't they just choose something that it has full, opportunity in terms of tradability? Why go the Ondo route?
Well, to be clear, Ondo assets are trading 24/7 already on multiple crypto exchanges. It's just that we cannot create these tokens in the current state over the weekend. Xstocks is the exact same thing, by the way. Xstocks cannot create tokens over the weekend. None of the tokenized stock spot providers can create tokens over the weekend. But our assets can trade 24/7 as long as a book is deployed on a crypto exchange where it can trade. Now, in parallel, you also have the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, a lot of the other TradFi players trying to move towards 24/7 markets because they see that this is what the market wants. The moment that happens and we can actually acquire underlying shares in the TradFi market over the weekend, we can turn on 24/7 minting and burning of our assets, no problem.
Okay.
And then what you'll end up seeing is the liquidity that is already available on crypto exchanges over the weekend that is pre-funded is also going to get dramatically better because people can create and redeem over the weekend as well.
Yeah. Okay, so do you think the DTC is kind of going through a situation right now where they're just trying to appease shareholders and what's looked at? If you look at where some of the partnerships have been allocated, it's mostly been institutional versus what we've seen in other capacities around this, the perps markets, obviously what we've seen with X stocks, et cetera, even Coinbase to a certain extent. But do you think DTC is the only way people are going to be able to have shareholder rights now? Going through the DTCC.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate in the industry on whether it makes sense to have a wrapper being a new instrument that is created that is backed by an actual stock, but what you hold is not the same thing as the actual stock. It doesn't come with shareholder rights, although it does come with dividend rights depending on how it's structured. Versus, go for a native form. This is what the DTCC is doing. This is what, Securitize and Superstate and some others are doing. Our opinion has always been, let all models coexist, and then you let the market decide on what it is they want, right? Yeah. And right now, the market is already deciding, to be honest, and that is that the wrapper format is preferred because that's where all the growth is, driven by us and to a lesser extent, Xstocks. So, but let them all coexist. They each have their pros and cons, and then ultimately the market will decide what they prefer. There are also ways to make the wrapper model look a little bit more like the native version, right? If people really care about shareholder rights, you can construct a wrapper so that people can express their vote. Ondo announced a partnership with Broadridge to make that possible. So our wrappers, people are going to be able to connect their wallet to a front end. It's going to read which wrapper tokens you hold. And then depending on that balance, you're going to be able to express what your vote would be. And then Ondo, as the issuer and holder of the actual stock, will express that vote via Broadridge and our clearing and executing broker on your behalf, just like an asset manager and an ETF manager would. So there are ways to make the wrapper more similar to the native version.
All right, so that's interesting because now what you're kind of referring to here is that the market has spoken, at least I would say the current edge market, which is the crypto market that is looking at these kinds of investments. But it's likely that we're going to see traditional investors coming into this market. And if that is the case, what you're saying is they prefer this route versus the permissioned route that the DTCC is trying to create overall. So it's clearly two different philosophies. You think the market is going to go the permissionless route?
I think the demand we'll see will be in the permissionless route. It's exactly the same thing as we've seen with stable coins, right? Stable coins are also just wrappers, right? And they live offshore, they grew offshore. It's a wrapper around a dollar, it represents a dollar. The benefit of that wrapper model is that you can use it in DeFi, and it's very easy to list on crypto exchanges where the crypto native capital sits. So when you just look at the numbers already, tokenized stocks are following the wrapper model because it is a much more crypto native, on-chain native form factor. You can use it in DeFi, you can use it in self-custodial wallets, and you can use it on crypto exchanges. So that's where all the demand is. Now, it doesn't mean that the DTCC model is bad. Quite the contrary.
Well, why would we need it?
It's
though?
very good.
Well, why wouldn't we need it? Why would
because
we need
we,
that,
as the
if the market
issuer
is saying it's
of
working?
the wrapper, because we, as the issuer of the wrapper, need better financial market infrastructure so that we can actually tap into better liquidity 24/5 and down the line 24/7. And that ultimately is what the DTCC, in my opinion, is building. It's just a market infrastructure upgrade to support better liquidity at all hours. This is also what the NASDAQ, the New York Stock Exchange, what they're all working on, right? And the moment they get to 24/7, even better 24/5 liquidity, that is beneficial for us as the issuer of these wrappers, because we still have to acquire the underlying share for our wrappers. All of our wrappers right now are backed at the DTCC. So you're not taking DTCC out of the equation. Just like with stablecoins, all of your dollars and treasuries are still in the banking system, right? Just with our wrappers, everything sits at the DTCC.
Sure. So I guess the DTCC guy was right. He said everything's coming through us. Just
yeah. I mean, he's not wrong. He's deal with it, which is why we are actually part of the pilot that the DTCC is doing on tokenized stocks. Because if they improve their infrastructure, that helps us as the issuer of the wrappers. We're being the distributor of these stocks, essentially, right? And we've laid the rails, we've laid the partnerships. We make sure that offshore investors can access these products, because DTCC is going to do it in a permissioned way. But we can be that permission participant in the DTCC pilot, and as a result, really make sure that the DTCC is able to power these wrappers in a better way.
Okay. All right. So, Ian, I'm trying to put this together here. So this is getting routed via the DTCC for traditional finance rails. You've got the major distribution hubs that I would say are pretty much already in play. And I'll call them right now, at least in the stock side, I'd probably say someone like a Robinhood or an Interactive Brokers or someone in that range, okay? Then you've got the rails over here in the crypto land, which is trying to get into that. We'll call that Coinbase. How would you compete against those who have these massive distribution channels already in place and they're already locked in to be able to get to these assets? Where would Ondo's place be in that if they have massive distribution and control?
Yeah, so we do two things. We power the existing distribution platforms, right? Our assets are listed on Binance, BitGet, Gate, MetaMask, Phantom. A lot of the self-custodial wallets have no other option than to work with a wrapper company like ours. So we essentially power a lot of the existing distribution platforms, while in parallel also creating new platforms and services that can be brought direct to consumers. So we're building out our own distribution rails. Ondo Perps is the perfect example of that, because we believe we can do perps on stocks better than a Hyperliquid or a Trade XYZ can, precisely because we are the issuer of the tokenized spot collateral, which dramatically improves the capital efficiency of these perps platforms. So we can essentially do both, power existing distribution platforms while building up our own distribution rails.
Ian, you've got a good shtick going here. I will give you that. So
appreciate it.
In the sense of understanding where this market is trying to position, because I think this is going to be a brand new frontier, I think, for not only
100%.
tokenized securities, but how traders and investors look at these assets going forward. So definitely something to watch. When you look at Clarity right now, Ian, the where it sits today, which is kind of about a 50-50 chance, which is kind of the lowest we've seen in a while. Where do you stand on Clarity 1 passing, and does it matter to Ondo?
Yeah, I think it should pass, and I think it does matter, not just to Ondo, but the broader US. I mean, what you're already seeing is these tokenized stocks proliferating outside the US to offshore investors. And the US needs to be able to respond and put a framework in place that really says this is how you can do business in the US for all these tokenized products. So my worry a little bit with Clarity not passing is that this entire market will continue to grow offshore, just like stablecoins did, until it was so large that there's no other way that Congress needs to get involved and essentially make it happen in the US. I would not want that to happen. I think the US has an opportunity here to already lean forward and really embrace the space. And I think what you're starting to see is some of the vested interest, whether it's the banks or others, be a little bit afraid of that, right? But that's to be expected. So I do hope it passes. I'm confident right now and hopeful that it still can pass. I think the US needs it. So we are actively doing everything we can in order to make sure that we get to a bill that makes sense.
All right, so I'm looking here at the signed into law percentage. It's down to 47. Actually, I was wrong. It's under 50% now. So continuing to slip, really, and this is just in the last week that we've seen this. If it were to fail, though, and this does push off a lot of this activity offshore, wouldn't Ondo be a winner there? Because this essentially is what your business model is built around right now.
Yes, I think Ondo is very well hedged for Clarity failing. But we do not like it to fail because I think it is important for the US to continue to win. But you are correct in that right now we are the dominant player in the offshore market. Whether Clarity passes or not, we expect that to continue to be the case. Okay. But just for the US, as a patriot, I do hope that it passes.
All right. As far as the banks, do you think that the banks are truly against Clarity, or is it just they haven't got the right matchup yet for trying to make this new world work?
I mean, I think everyone with any of these bills wants to make sure that their own vested interests are there, right? And the interests of the banks as it relates to retaining their deposits and keeping their clients may have an interest in not be as lenient on the innovation front or on the stablecoin front or on the tokenized securities front as some others, right? So everything you see is just, I don't blame the banks for it per se. I think everyone just wants to do what's right for their own business. But I think if the US wants to be a meaningful player in the digital asset space and actually have innovation and keep the market in the US and not go offshore, I think this bill needs to be pretty aggressive on the innovation front. The banks may not like that, but otherwise the US just risks losing its position. Like, to an extent, it almost doesn't. There are regulatory frameworks outside the US that have already embraced the wrapper model, right? Ondo's tokenized stocks have an approved prospectus in the European Union. Our assets are classified under MiFID as transferable securities. Our assets have an approval from the FSRA in Abu Dhabi for secondary market trading. Binance is using their local broker-dealer in Abu Dhabi to list our assets and make them available for trade. So the wrapper model outside the US is not going anywhere. It's going to continue to grow, and more regulators are embracing it. I think the US just runs the risk of not embracing it and then keeping all the entire wrapper model offshore. And I don't think that would be in the interest of the US. So, but I do want to highlight, to an extent, to what you highlighted before, market structure and what it ends up being. As a patriot, I hope the US does the right thing. Even if they don't, I think Ondo is pretty well positioned in order to keep growing offshore. I just also want to make sure we can also grow in the US.
Well, that's the key right there, my friend, is let's don't screw up the financial markets that could be exploding around us. I just saw news this morning, with Japan, they've also altered their crypto gains tax. We're seeing almost every Asian country out there that's making it more beneficial for those kinds of investors, which means those assets are starting to go live within those regulatory frameworks. So it's a big deal right now that is happening all around us, just not in the United States just yet. So hopefully your wish will be the case. Ian, thank you so much for coming in today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If you like this video, hit like and subscribe, drop a comment down below, and also join our free private member group. The link is in the description.